Good evening, I'm Chris Nachkite. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Following months of turmoil within the Liberal Party, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation this morning. Trudeau has now requested the president of the Liberal Party to begin the process of appointing a new leader. And he has also asked Governor General Mary Simon to suspend Parliament until March 24th. APTN's Savannah Craig has the story.
It has become obvious to me with the internal battles that I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
And with those words, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will step down as leader of the Liberal government. Trudeau said he will remain as Prime Minister until a new party leader is elected.
I am a fighter, and I am not someone who backs away from a fight, particularly when a fight is as important as this one is. But I have always been driven by my love for Canada, by my desire to serve Canadians, and by what is in the best interest of Canadians.
The resignation follows months of turmoil within the Liberal Party and a gridlocked House of Commons. It culminated with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's resignation in December. Freeland stated she had been at odds with Trudeau for weeks over the best path forward for Canada. When asked whether Freeland's resignation sparked his decision, Trudeau said he would not provide details.
Anyone who's been watching politics closely over the past months will know that Parliament has been entirely seized by obstruction and filibustering and a total lack of productivity.
Trudeau also asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, whose party is leading in the polls, responded through a video posted on social media.
They want to protect their pensions and paycheck by sweeping their hated leader under the rug months before an election to trick you and then do it all over again.
Trudeau said little about Indigenous people during his press conference, but he mentioned Liberal efforts has moved Canada forward on reconciliation. Mi'kmaq Liberal Member of Parliament Jaime Baptiste says legislation affecting Indigenous people will halt with Parliament being suspended.
And there was nothing I would like to see more than to finish some of these pieces of legislation and see them get to royal assent. But with all three opposition parties saying that they're not willing to work with us, we're left in a position where these important pieces of legislation may die on the table.
However, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said he would not work with a new leader. The NDP had been supporting the Liberal minority government up until this past December. Singh said he would use a non-confidence vote against the Liberals as early as possible to trigger an election.
New Democrats will be voting against this government for an election where Canadians will have a choice. The Liberals have let you down. They've let you down again and again. It doesn't matter who the leader is, the Liberals have let you down. They do not deserve another chance.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak responded to Trudeau's resignation in a written statement, saying he has taken meaningful steps to address issues that matter to First Nations, including access to housing, clean water, education, the issue of child welfare, and the passing of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Woodhouse-Nepenak says much more work remains, but Trudeau's actions have provided a foundation for future governments to build upon. Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
Premiers across Canada are reacting to the resignation of Justin Trudeau, including Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew. During a Monday press conference, Kinew thanked Trudeau for his service to Canada and the sacrifices he made to serve as Prime Minister. When asked about U.S.-Canada relations following Trudeau's resignation, Kinew said premiers across Canada will continue to hold the mantle to protect jobs and the Canadian economy. He said he would continue to focus on serving Manitobans by protecting the agricultural, energy, and transportation sectors.
We have a responsibility right now to continue to focus on both the incoming American administration, but also our state level partners across the U.S. And the focus that I have is to stand up for you and your family, your jobs, so that you can put food on the table. It'll be up to the federal government to determine when the next federal election is. We know that there will be one this year. And like I said at the outset, and have said since the election in Manitoba, we'll work with whoever's there in Ottawa on your behalf for the best interests of Manitobans and Canadians.
And reaction to the Prime Minister's calling it quit and proroguing Parliament continues to roll in from all directions. With more on that, our regular political commentator Jennifer Leywitz joins us now from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So Jennifer, Justin Trudeau has read the writing on the wall and stepped down as Liberal leader. What are the possible consequences of this?
Well, I think, we're seeing now that Parliament is going to be prorogued until late March, which, if anyone is familiar with what happens when a government is prorogued, is all of the current legislation dies on the order paper. So there's some big things we know that we're passing through Parliament. The water legislation, I think, was one of the bigger ones. I don't know if that's received royal assent yet, but that's essentially going to put everything at a standstill. And right now, one of the number one calls I've been fielding from Leadership on Nations today is what is going to happen with the negotiations around our agriculture benefits, because there are a lot of nations that are attempting to advance negotiations around ag settlements. So I think there's a lot of questions in the air right now as to what's going to happen. And not only that, if we're inevitably going to have a change of government, when is that going to be? Are we still going to see that in October with a new leader? What is Jagmeet planning to do with the confidence and supply? What happens when they come back in March? I think there's a lot up in the air right now that Canadians are not understanding. Where do we go from here?
Definitely a lot of unknowns for sure. What if the Conservatives emerge as the main beneficiaries of Justin Trudeau's actions? What does a Conservative government mean for First Nations people?
I think one of the biggest questions right now is, what are your priorities as a nation? I think, Conservatives traditionally are not the government of a lot of funding. They're not the government of a lot of, social issues being at the forefront of their way of government. So I think there's going to be a definite narrative shift in what we see for priorities, especially when it comes to nations. And I think one of the biggest questions leadership have to ask right now is, what is going to happen with Bill C-92? That has not been passed yet. We're still seeing that AFN is still at the forefront of these negotiations. Where's the child welfare settlement going to be? And prevention funding and CHRT funding, all of those things that we've previously seen that have kind of moved under the Liberal government. And Jordan's principle, we're hearing about a lot of backlogs. What is the Conservatives' plans to fix that?
Really briefly for this next question, how will Trudeau's move affect ordinary people?
I think right now, ordinary Canadians are just paying attention to him stepping down. I think a lot of people are ready for the change, but what that change looks like for Canadians, we're still not sure of.
And Jennifer, what are the Indian leaders saying about all of this, including the Indigenous leaders? I think about APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak, who just shared a post on Facebook about this just before the noon hour.
Yeah, I had saw that the APTN National Chief had basically said, thank you for your time in office, thank you for your service. I did think it was a little bit too positive in the pandering, especially to the government, because at the end of the day, the government is facilitating the Indian Act. All of us as Indigenous people are going to advance self-determination. We're going to exist how we see fit in politics, but at that national high level, I do expect some type of pro-sovereignty and wanting to advance us, and coming in and saying, thank you, you've done the most anyone has ever done, when this was a government that spent the most money fighting First Nations in court. They spent more in the first few years than Stephen Harper did. How can you be so positive when, in my opinion, they do deserve critiquing in multiple different areas? So I think it was a little bit too positive, and I was hoping for a little bit more of a, we hope for better in the next leadership, and we'll work with whoever's there.
And finally, Jennifer, this last question, there's a lot of names being thrown around, but is there any guesses on who will take over the Liberal leadership now?
I would say pay very, very close attention to Mr. Mark Carney.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that as well. Maybe Chrystia Freeland, maybe Dominic LeBlanc.
Yeah, I think they're all going to be at the forefront.
Well, Jennifer, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you.
The nonprofit organization behind a downtown Whitehorse shelter is under scrutiny following a number of deaths. Last month, 2 people died at the shelter within 2 weeks of each other. And as Sarah Connors tells us, one of the deceased family members says the organization needs to do better so no more people are lost. Here's that story.
The This is just his smudging stuff. He would smudge every day at home. And that's how I knew he was home, because every single morning he would smudge with us and put all of his medicine out.
Nikita Bailey has fond memories of her stepfather, 56-year-old Leonard Capablanc. The Fort Nelson First Nation member lived at home with Bailey, though he would often visit the Whitehorse emergency shelter to socialize. She says her stepfather died from a suspected overdose at the shelter on December 18th.
And he was just always so caring and took care of us, as any father would.
The government-funded shelter is operated by nonprofit Connective. Bailey says no one from Connective contacted her or her family about her stepfather's death. She later learned Capablanc died in a shower room, and she was told that no one checked on him for 25 minutes. Bailey feels her stepfather's death could have been prevented if staff had acted sooner.
They showcase and frame themselves as people who have the ability to take care of others when they're in a vulnerable state, but they don't.
Last year, a coroner's inquest took a closer look at the deaths of 4 First Nations women who died at the shelter. 2 of the women overdosed in a shower room where they were discovered unresponsive hours later. The inquest recommended a policy review that entails monitoring high-risk spaces like the shower rooms to prevent more deaths. Bailey feels the way Connective operates isn't good enough, and she wants to see change so no more lives are lost.
Restructuring their policies and procedures, actually following their regulations, and listening to their community, because it's their fault. It's their fault that all these deaths happened.
Connective did not respond to APTN's request for comment. The jury for last year's coroner's inquest recommended that any future deaths that take place at the shelter should be subject to an independent review. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Sticking with the Whitehorse shelter, 2 lawsuits have been filed against the Yukon government surrounding the deaths of 2 women who died there. Miranda Titsia Charlie and Darla Skookum were 2 of the 4 women at the center of last year's coroner's inquest. The women died at the shelter in separate incidents in 2022 and 2023. The lawsuits, which were filed by the women's family members, argue the shelter has inadequate policies and training, as well as a pattern of systemic negligence, and that the women's deaths could have been prevented. One of the lawsuits also names Connective as a defendant. The allegations have yet to be tested in court. A Court of King's Bench justice has extended but not expanded an injunction filed against a group of protesters opposing a development in the LeMay Forest on the southern outskirts of Winnipeg. The protesters have been camped outside LeMay Forest since late December to stop developers' removal of trees on what they say is sacred land. On December 31st, the court granted an interim injunction ordering the protesters not to impede access to the forest land owned by Tokol Development of Toronto. Ian Histed represents some of the protesters. He said they are concerned about potential unmarked graves on the land that could belong to Indigenous children. Today, the court granted a continuation, but not an expansion of the December 31st injunction, as requested by Tokol Development, to respect protesters' freedom of expression. Organizers with the Coalition to Save LeMay Forest said they were happy with the decision, but they plan to file an injunction of their own against Tokol Developments.
I'm happy with it right now because that gives us time to organize and to make a call out to our governments to assist us in saving the LeMay Forest and saving our children.
We have to get to the next level, so we need to get injunctions going of our own, and we haven't had time because, of course, this all happened over Christmas time. So that was definitely deliberate, and so now we've got ourselves, we know what we're doing, so we'll be back.
We have to take a short break, but when we return, we'll tell you about an Indigenous woman who has been an advocate for inclusiveness and Indigenous rights. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our next story is about a unique person who bridges both the deaf and hearing worlds together while tackling inclusivity, Indigenous rights, and revitalization in 4 different languages. APTN's Kim Sullivan introduces us to Marsha Ireland.
I thank you for allowing me to talk with you.
She's a deaf Oneida woman, but also a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and an advocate for inclusivity. Marcia is also the Assembly of First Nations Accessibility Ambassador.
The 7th generation teachings of the Haudenosaunee peoples reminds us of the importance of building strong, supportive relationships with one another. They remind us that the decisions we make today can contribute to creating a sustainable and inclusive world for the next 7 generations.
It is with those generations in mind that for almost a decade now, Marcia and her husband Max have been helping to revitalize an Indigenous sign language. To be born deaf in a spoken world is alienating. Most of what a person learns, from their surroundings to concepts of who they are, is acquired through language.
One. All right.
At a young age, Marcia was sent to an oral school for the deaf, where lip reading and speech were the main methods of teaching. It took years before she was given a tool to communicate, American Sign Language. Yet, Marcia still felt like an outsider.
English and ASL really did not align with me. It really felt like such a disconnect. It didn't support my identity as a First Nations person.
Yanko.
She thought that by advocating for ASL interpreters to be allowed into longhouses, she would finally connect with her Indigenous identity. That was not the case.
No one anticipated was that they would speak in Oneida, and the interpreters just put their hands down because they didn't understand Oneida.
In ASL, we would say thank you.
Limited to American Sign Language, which is based on English, Marcia was, once again, excluded from the conversation. Marcia did not want any other members of the deaf community to experience the same thing, including her 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, many of them also deaf. With her husband Max bringing together the deaf and hearing worlds, and with the help of an Oneida elder, Olive Elm, who translated English into Oneida, they created a sign language that truly represents their native roots.
Like in ASL, they would say the great law of peace, and they would have to fingerspell each word. But for me, this is the great law of peace. We're talking about the tree and it being rooted in the ground, and the sky above it. And so this is the great law of peace.
Oneida Sign Language is deeply based in meaning and not into words.
So in ASL, you would do dog, but in OSL, we would use this, truly reflective of the animal. And so we really looked at what does it mean? What's naturally there?
Marcia now uses this new voice, sense of pride, and identity to speak up.
I'm always going to try and engage with people because I think that we really have to come together as equals. However, I do come to the table quite often and say, but we forget about those who are deaf. You know, we say we want equality. We're not always remembering that we need equality and that we all haven't considered everyone here.
On access to
the role of AFN Accessibility Ambassador allows her to come to the table with a whole community of disability advocates backing her, including Okanagan Indian Bands Chief Byron Lewis, whose daughter lives with disabilities. He moved a resolution rejecting the Accessible Canada Act in order to advance distinct First Nations accessibility legislation.
You know, the motion and everything like that is sort of the tip of the iceberg because this gives us an opportunity to, one, is to highlight the issue, two, is put the support mechanisms in place, and the third one is actually start helping these people, not only the people with the disabilities, but the people that are actually supporting them, because all of them need that. It doesn't matter if it's a physical disability or one that's with mental disability.
Advocates are asking for sustainable funding and the recognition of First Nations' right to design and deliver healthcare and disability services. Chief Lewis says this resolution is not solely focused on Indigenous deaf populations. It benefits everyone in the communities, helping them heal and reconnect in the way their ancestors did. Just like the efforts made by Marcia and Max, which are creating a way for future generations to engage with one another.
That's the beauty of it. It combines everything to everyone. And that's inclusion rather than exclusion.
Hearing our deaf, sharing in knowledge. Kim Sullivan, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Thank you, Kim. We have photo of the day, weather, and even some Toronto Raptors news coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Time now for our photo of the day. Matt Janvier shared this photo of a snowy canopy of trees as seen from Lloydminster. Thanks for sharing, Matt. Send us your pictures to share at aptn.ca for a chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east, Charlottetown 0, Halifax -2. Happy Valley Goose Bay 2, Cartwright 1. Gaspé 0, Quebec City -5. Peterborough -9, Sarnia -4. Big Trout Lake -28, Sioux Lookout -16. -32 in Churchill, Thompson -21. -18 in Barons River, Dauphin -16 and partly cloudy. Saskatoon -10, Yorkton -16. Meadow Lake -5, Buffalo Narrows -4. High Level -12, Peace River -6. 6 in Calgary, Red Deer 1. 7 in Campbell River, Bella Coola 8. Dees Lake -6, Smithers -1. -22 in Old Crow, Dawson -20. Yellowknife -9, Wrigley -24. Tuktoyaktuk -22, Palatuck -22 as well. Baker Lake -33, Chesterfield -35. And -34 in Igloolik, Arctic Bay -29. The Toronto Raptors will be wearing a new Indigenous-inspired logo when they hit the court tonight.
I want to use this opportunity to share what I can about my culture and my people.
The logo was designed by Luke Swinson, an Anishinaabe artist based in Kitchener, Ontario, and is from the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. The jerseys will be seen in the public for the first time during tonight's Indigenous Heritage game against the Milwaukee Bucks. Go Raptors, go. And that's your evening newscast for this Monday, January 6th. We're back again for your daytime newscast. Make sure to join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, Masicho, Miigwech, hi hi. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.